On April 16th, one of the worst recorded U.S. tornado outbreaks occurred in North Carolina and the surrounding states. I interviewed some of the people involved.
Right through these woods is where it first come through, and our house was the one that it come in contact with very first back here. We moved in with our daughter and son-in-law, stayed with them until we got our new home built. We're just very blessed.
I was amazed at how many people just come right out and help each other.
Where specifically did most of this help come from?
A lot of it from the neighborhood here, from our church.
The most effective relief was faith-based organizations, the local merchants.
Stores contributing food, water.
Townsend Chicken provided our church just thousands of chicken breasts.
Without much government involvement, volunteer help took the lead in this disaster. And what did the government do?
Nothing really.
I'm glad that we didn't need them, really.
But the government was much more involved when Hurricane Fran hit the coast a few years before.
When we experienced Fran, I didn't find the government at all helpful. I had never experienced a military state before, and that's precisely what it was. I didn't even know I was in the United States. We did not find anything like that. With this last disaster, they did restrict the people going into the neighborhood.
We couldn't get in here till late Sunday afternoon because of all the devastation through here. They wouldn't let just anybody come in. That was for safety reasons, though, because of all the debris and
Power lines
and everything all down.
The government should ensure safety in times of crisis, but when they get too involved, they can often overreach and create a bottleneck when you have one group for which all others have to get permission to work. This prevents the vast supply of private aid from reaching the people. Also, overreaching government can endanger people when it acts like it did in Hurricane Katrina and takes away guns from people who bought them legally so they had no way to defend themselves.
No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
Instructions to disarm anyone inside.
A military presence controlling the recovery will never be as effective as just citizens and volunteers working under the protection of local government. When the government doesn't interfere with the recovery, businesses also have a free market incentive to help. In this crisis, businesses were a big part of the relief effort. If stores had engaged in price gouging, they might have made more money in the short term, but at the cost of their reputation, which would hurt them in the long run. The government has a role to play in times of crisis by helping prevent looting and keeping order. History has shown us that what works best is a light-handed government that gets out of the way of volunteer help. But a distant big government can create more problems in a misguided attempt to help when they try and control the recovery.
When a natural disaster occurs, price gouging may happen. So what exactly is price gouging? Simply put, it's charging higher prices under emergency conditions. As Walter Williams once said, passionate issues require dispassionate analysis. Although it may seem immoral as businesses raise prices on necessities after a disaster, economics show how price gouging can be beneficial to both disaster victims and businesses.
Despite its benefits, there are laws that actually prohibit price gouging, which seem to protect disaster victims in the short run since people don't have to pay a high price for an emergency good. However, in the long run, these laws actually hinder the economic reconstruction of a country.
Let's create a hypothetical example of a city before a natural disaster. A business produces 8 units of gasoline and another produces 6 units of food. When a natural disaster strikes, producers lose factors of production. The first business is now only able to produce 4 units of gasoline and the other only 2 units of food. So, the supply of the good decreases.
Let's have a look at a diagram. Initially, we have the demand curve and the supply curve. The economy is in equilibrium E. The initial quantity is Q1 and the initial price is P1. After the natural disaster, the economy experiences a decrease in supply, as shown by the shift of S1 to S2. The result of the decrease in supply is a greater price and a lower quantity. Although the good is more expensive than it was before, it is still available to people.
Also, since the good is more expensive, not many people will have the incentive to hoard the good, leaving more for everyone else. What else? Increased prices will act as a signal for outside producers to earn higher revenues by selling in the disaster-stricken area. So, the increase in producers will cause the supply to rise again. The result? A lower price and a higher quantity. This would only happen if price gouging is permitted, because otherwise outside producers would have no incentive to sell their goods there.
Furthermore, with more competition, a business has the incentive to make their good better than their competitors. Thus, the consumers benefit as they have better products. Due to price gouging, a shortage of necessities is foregone, and in the long run, the quantity will increase. So, price gouging is a good thing.
Now, let's have a look at what happens when price gouging is prohibited. A price ceiling is set at the initial price level. At the price ceiling, the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied. As a result, a shortage is created. Why? Because at the lower price, consumers want more of the good, but producers aren't able to produce as much as they did before. Therefore, victims are unable to buy an emergency good in a time of need.
So, why does the government create laws against price gouging? The government tries to help families afford necessities in the short run, but price gouging has negative effects in the long run. In addition, the laws can backfire since they create shortages of necessities, hurting the victims even more. The surprise of economics? Price gouging. It's a good thing.
Welcome! Today we're discussing the economics of a natural disaster. Over the past decade, the world has witnessed several natural disasters. These include the South Asian tsunami, Hurricane Katrina, and the Tohoku earthquake. One of the impacts of a natural disaster is the disruption of supply and demand, which limits the ability of victims to recover. How can we encourage more effective recovery? First, let's look at the concept of supply and demand. This is the definition. What does that big block of text even mean? Well, what we need to know is that as availability decreases, price increases, and vice versa. So what happens after a natural disaster occurs? The system is pushed to the extremes and something known as price gouging happens. What is price gouging? Price gouging refers to selling goods or commodities at much higher prices than reasonable or fair. It often happens after a natural disaster because there are limited essential supplies but many buyers. For example, after Hurricane Katrina, one bottle of water sold for $7. It was $1 before the disaster. Price gouging can cut people off from much needed supplies, so to prevent it, governments often implement price ceilings. A price ceiling is a government-imposed limit on the price of a product. It prevents conditions that make necessary commodities unattainable. But what impedes relief efforts after a disaster? Do price ceilings hurt or help? Firstly, there's a lack of information and it may be inaccurate. After the 2004 tsunami, one-third of NGOs in India reported that gaps and inaccuracies in data hampered relief efforts. Also, normal methods of communication are slow and incomplete. Even if inaccuracies are discovered, they can't be communicated quickly. Finally, layers of bureaucracy further distort information. So we can see that accurate information and quick communication are necessary, but often not present after a natural disaster. Right. So to protect victims from delayed relief efforts, the government should take no role in controlling prices and let them fluctuate. How can these uncontrolled prices help victims? Well, as we've said, price ceilings limit prices, which prevents organizations from correctly identifying supplies which are needed most. That's because when prices fluctuate, they tell us which items are in high demand. Since prices are communicated easily and are accurate sources of information, relief organizations can then use them to better respond to victims' needs. But won't price gouging occur? That's true. So to make this an effective solution, response must be immediate. Relief organizations must deliver goods to the people before they are forced to buy them at insane prices. Also, the government must trust that private institutions will not engage in price gouging. Kinda hard to do. Not really. After Hurricane Katrina, Walmart encouraged managers to hand out free supplies to victims. It also had supply trucks ready before the government did. In conclusion, to protect victims of natural disasters from delayed relief efforts, the government should take no economic role as long as it comes to price